What we're going to look at in this lesson is a quick offshoot of gas exchange and gas regulation in the human body by looking at hyperventilation and some associated examples. So when we're talking about voluntary breathing, we spoke about this yesterday. Voluntary control of breathing comes from the cerebral cortex or the cerebrum. The reason that we want voluntary breathing and we have voluntary breathing in addition to autonomic control of our breathing is it allows us to speak and it also protects us from taking in dangerous gases and or water if we're underwater into our lungs. Now, while we can have voluntary control of our breathing, it's not possible for us to hold our breath forever. Eventually, we're going to have a strong stimulus in the form of carbon dioxide, and that's going to stimulate the inspiratory center to make it feel like you just cannot hold your breath any longer, and so you take that deep breath in. So when we talk about hyperventilation, okay, this is after you've held your breath for a long time, you might have a case of extreme, rapid, and deep breathing. Now, hyperventilation is only going to lead to a very small increase in the amount of oxygen, but hyperventilation removes a large amount of carbon dioxide really quickly. And again, we can hyperventilate ourselves by quickly breathing in rapid succession, or it might take place in response to a stress provided to the body, aka we've just held our breath for a very long period of time. Now, hyperventilation, it's going to usually correct itself due to the carbon dioxide levels coming back down and a lack of stimulus to breathe. However, a decreased carbon dioxide level reduces that stimulation to breathe, but there is a really niche example that we're going to look at now with diving. So what we're going to start off with is just having a look at normal breathing before we look at hyperventilation. So in a case of normal breathing, my red line here represents oxygen, and my blue line here represents carbon dioxide. Now, when we're talking about this red line here, I'll just follow along. We're breathing normally, and then we dive into the water. As we dive into the water, we're moving around, so our oxygen is being used up by our cells in order to go through cellular respiration, and it keeps going down and down and down until eventually we surface, and then our oxygen level comes right back up again and returns to normal. In the case of carbon dioxide, what's happening during a normal dive that we might dive down to the bottom of the pool or at the beach, we start with a much lower level of carbon dioxide. And what happens is this lower level of carbon dioxide, we dive and it gradually begins to increase and increase and increase as we produce more carbon dioxide as a part of cellular respiration. Now, eventually, we will reach this threshold. And at this threshold, suddenly, carbon dioxide levels have increased to a point where the inspiratory center is triggered. And we feel a need to breathe. However, because of our voluntary control of breathing, we can actually hold on to our breath for slightly longer, and eventually we reach the surface, we take a deep breath in, maybe we hyperventilate a little bit. However, we take that deep breath in, carbon dioxide peters off again and reduces there. So we no longer have that stimulation to breathe. Now, a really interesting case with hyperventilation is having a look at diving. So in hyperventilation, as we discussed, it doesn't really increase the amount of oxygen. Okay, and the amount of oxygen doesn't increase too much. And so what happens is we do, however, get rid of a much larger quantity of carbon dioxide. Now, what this does, removing that amount of carbon dioxide means that we start at a much lower level, and it takes us far longer to reach that stimulus and to reach that urgent need to breathe. What our body will cross over instead as a consequence of that is your body has another threshold. And this threshold is where your body is so low on oxygen that it blacks out. And it blackout normally, if you're on land, would be a good thing because it would force your body to lie down. The medulla oblongata would take over control once again and you begin breathing. However, when you're underwater, deep underwater, and you black out, you no longer have the ability to fight that control of breathing, and so your body takes over and you breathe in water and you drown. So this is a really dangerous scenario with hyperventilation. If people hyperventilate too much before they dive, they can end up blacking out before they get the need to breathe. So it's not like they're feeling short of breath or anything like this. They're simply black out because their carbon dioxide levels, which provide that strong stimulus, started at a much lower level.